Thank you for joining us. We're doing a talk today on behalf of the MIA TV Drama Division, and we're looking at the state of premium TV drama production across the European region. We are going to be looking at various different points. To start with, we're going to be talking to our various different speakers about the individual lockdown situation of their region. And we're going to be talking about the technical ways they're overcoming production barriers and how they can work safely in the future. We're going to talk about those who are already in lockdown and those who are hoping to come out soon, and we're going to compare notes and techniques. And then after that, we're going to move on from production into the distribution side of things and look at the challenges the distributors are facing. Once we've talked about distribution, we'll be looking at subjects such as what genres are becoming popular in lockdown and going into the development process, how that's changing and evolving in this current situation, and looking for ways where you can make use the time very positively. From that, we'll be then looking at the financial challenges of the lockdown situation. And throughout all of this, our main area of focus will be working with the different producing outlets. So we're going to be talking about what are the benefits and challenges for local production and commissioning particularly, likewise the challenges and opportunities that streamers are finding in this current situation. And then also, as we're a European panel, we're going to be looking very much at co-production and the challenges for that. And we're hoping to find some positive ways to shape the future TV drama landscape in this current challenging circumstances. But we will be trying to find some positives within it. And so briefly, I'll introduce you to our different speakers. First of all, we have Elena Lai from CEPI, and she oversees a producing collective of over 80,000 members, and she's going to give us an introduction to everything that's going on in the audiovisual sector across Europe. And then we have Dariusz Jablonski from Apple Film. Dariusz also represents an important producing body, the European Producers Club, and he's also a very significant producer in Poland, and he's been involved with a lot of shows you may have heard of. One of the most well-known in the UK is called Spies of Warsaw, which starred David Tennant and was a BBC and Arte production. And he's also working on The Pleasure Principle, which is one of the first very high-level premium co-productions with various countries from his region. So he'll be telling us all about that. Then we have Nicola Soderlund, who's a distributor for Echo Rights. He has a lot of shows from the Turkish and Asian region, and he's also done a very popular show recently for Viaplay called Conspiracy of Silence, which was by 12 Town Productions. And then we have Ran Tellem from Media Pro Studios, which is a Spanish-based producer and distributor. And Ran has been involved with some really exciting projects, such as he oversaw or was involved with the Prisoners of War original Israeli version, which eventually became Homeland. And he's currently doing some exciting stuff with Hulu Japan and HBO Asia, and a project called The Paradise, which is a collaboration with Finland's public service broadcaster and is set in the Costa del Sol. Okay, and then we have from the Czech Republic, we have Filip Bobinski, and Filip has done some very successful shows such as Wonderful Times, which won the Golden Nymph Award, and another very popular show called The Manor House. And he's also involved in production for other projects such as the Borgia TV series. And you also, if sorry if I've said anything wrong, please correct me. And also we have Nicolo De Angelis, who is CEO and head of international co-productions for Fabula PL Pictures. And he did a show for Netflix recently called Baby, and has upcoming shows such as Mafia and Sons and Callas, which I presume is a Maria Callas. Yeah, related. And then finally, we have Thomas Senya. Sorry if I pronounced your name. Yeah. And Thomas is working on various projects, including a post-Brexit political satire called Parliament, is that correct? And also the Alliance project, which is based on Phileas Fogg's adventures. And no? Anyway, well, please correct me. I've probably got some of those small details wrong, and I apologize for not saying all of your company's names. So please drop them in when we next talk to you. But to start with, I'd like to hand over to Eleanor, who's now going to give us our talk on the overall, her take on the overall CEPI's European situation. Okay, thanks so much, Eleanor.
Thank you very much, Nick, and hello, everybody. Definitely a very generous introduction from your side, Nick, and I'm very happy, and thank you for the invitation to the MIA market organizers, of course, and to have so many great speakers like you guys today with me. So I will have to be up to the task, so to say. The first thing, obviously, that I have to say is that the industry went through a very tough time, and this is not going to come as a surprise to any of you. In the last 3 months, all the national associations of CEPI, but I'm aware that also colleagues like the European Producers Club, where Darius is, and many others of you that are also parts of national association have been struggling and exchanging a lot of information to make sure you could go back to work as soon as possible. So in CEPI, for instance, we had to run a mapping exercise to understand economically the level of damages that the production companies were going through at this time. And this is not just sometimes a tedious task to do, because producers have to go through bureaucracy and tick a lot of boxes and let us know what's happening. But regrettably, it is crucial at the moment, because the European Commission is at the moment taking, the right measures of support from a funding point of view. And so it is important to guide them in the best way possible. And in CEPI, for instance, we found out that more than 66% of the companies and the National Association had to stop completely their productions. So that is a very high level percentage. And a lot of the producers had to stop third parties contracts as well, which tells you that there is a domino effect from an economic point of view that touches upon not only the AV sector, but also many other sectors that are crucial for Europe at the moment. A lot of producers, of course, had also to put their employees, so the cast and crew, on benefits or furlough, as they call it in the UK. So that was also quite important, because it's not only the economic aspects you take into consideration, but also the human development of people that cannot work, that cannot express themselves. So for us, it was a tough time to exactly prove that this crisis is taking place right now. It was taking place 3 months ago, but it's not finished. It's something that is going on and will affect, regrettably, our production companies also in the longer run. So this is something that, of course, we are considering, and we would like to make sure that the European institution hear us on these aspects as much as possible. Very interestingly, there have been several debates in the European Parliament and in the European Commission, and there are numerous funding existing at the moment, but small and medium enterprises are not finding their way specifically on this funding. So CEPI has been very close looking for asking the Commission, please try to create an easy way, a user-friendly way for small companies to understand whether they can match fund when it's not possible to act anymore at the national level. So this is what we are trying to do as a European association, and we are trying to do it in synergy also with our colleagues from the European producer clubs, for instance. Particularly at the moment, there is one part that is very strongly discussed, which is dedicated to the guarantee facility, a funding which is part of the media program. And for this, it's very interesting that 37% of SEPI companies said, we don't want immediate loans, we need cash flow. So this is an important part that has been raised very much with our counterparts in the European institutions. And 87% of this company are asking for subsidies because they will not survive otherwise in 6 months' times. And it's not only the small companies, guys, it's also bigger companies that are affected by that. Something which is very important also to mention is that, of course, there have been national measures that have helped a lot during this time. The health and safety protocol, for instance, they have been crucial at the moment because otherwise the industry could not go back to work. You have examples in France, in Italy, of course, in Austria as well. They have all what is also important. They are very important because they have similarities and they didn't pop up like, you know, just one after the other by chance. There has been a strong solidarity and exchange between the national companies to tackle elements of these protocols and synergies with the trade unions to go back as fast as possible to work for all of you. The most important topic at the moment that is burning for the production side at the European level is definitely the element of insurances. We had examples coming up from countries like France and Austria, where you have seen funds that have been allocated in France, about 50 millions, in Austria, 25 millions, to help the production companies to go back to work in case there is, to be protected in case there is again a second wave of COVID. In Austria, for instance, you can see that has happened very recently, and it will go on, this kind of fund, because it's not a proper insurance. We have to be clear on the fact that they are not, the insurances companies have not been very helpful at this stage. So the state, the Ministry of Economy in Austria, and in France, the ministry and the CNC have allocated this money. So many other member states are doing the same for helping the production companies, but this will not be enough. And this is why, again, the European associations like SEPI or EPC will have to make sure that also at the European level, there will be some match funding that can help these insurances to blossom. And I'm sure that each of you in your countries are following this very closely. So this is just to give, I don't know whether I use too much of my time, Nick, so if I have more time, I can tackle more, but this is just to give an overview, and the funding part at the European level will play a crucial role in Creative Europe, in Horizon Europe, and most of all in the recovery plan that the Commission has allocated, but where it is not clear yet how our sector is going to be treated. So this is where we will have to be influenced at the national level, guys, with our national associations.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that, Elena. That's a great point to get us going. And what we're going to do now is, bearing in mind all those challenging issues that Eleanor has worked out, at the end of the day, we are all hoping to go back into production as soon as possible. So what we're going to do now is talk to various representatives from the different regions and get an overview of what stage of lockdown different countries or regions are in. And then maybe we can share notes on some of the techniques that different countries and regions are using to start shooting again. I mean, the kind of thing we're going to be looking at, for example, in the UK, is that some of the soap operas have now started shooting again, but they're using certain useful, basically safety measures, such as say for example, doing their own makeup or traveling alone to set and using fewer actors for certain scenes and these kind of things. So we're going to go and start with Darius from Apple Film. He's done a lot of work for the European Producers Club, particularly on figuring out what safety measures are most effective. And my understanding is they've started to implement them. So we'll go over to Darius now, and he can talk us through what's going on in Poland. And then we're going to move around the group, talking to people who, to start with, who have maybe started shooting, and then the second half to those who hope to start shooting soon. Okay, thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you very much, Nick. I find really meaningful that this web session, how we are going to start, is coming from Mia and Rome and Italy. Because for last weeks, we were observing the situation which started in Italy. It was becoming tragic, and I'm very, very happy that hopefully it's behind us, and we can talk now about how we are going to start. European Producers Club is grouping over 130 experienced international producers, and that's why our work was complementary to what CEPI is doing, because we had to go for the action, and we issued before mid-March 10 points, 10 measures action plan, which was an advice to all the governments and European Commission and all the public funding bodies how to help our industry, and many of these points were implemented. This is very important for us. And also, I'm not able to reveal many details, but this is important for our industry, that European Producers Club was invited to be a member of Commissioner Thierry Breton task force, and our President Alvaro Longoria and Alexandre Lebrun were taking part in it. And I hope that soon the conclusions of this very small group will be revealed, and it shows the strategic approach regarding audiovisual industry for future, because I think that COVID is extremely important experience. COVID is showing us our weaknesses, and I would say that one of the most important in human being things is that majority of our people, of our creators, are self-employees or having contracts for work only. So in a situation like COVID, we realize that majority of our society is helpless, because our people, our creators of the content, have no any social security, no any support, no any help. So I would like to thank to all the governments and all the bodies which created a special social funds to help from day to day to all our crews and creators and cast, which were without any employment. And that's one of the main points I see as a crucial to be implemented, to be repaired, to be created. And in Poland, coming to my country and my region, in Poland, we are working very hard about creating a social security for the situation like COVID, if it will happen again. And of course, nobody is sure what is the future, but it's better that our creators would be safe in the situation like this, because we saw so many tragic life situations that we cannot allow this situation to be repeated. This is our opinion. Also, I would like to say that in Poland we are open, and some films are coming back to the set. Altogether, over 160 productions were stopped at the beginning of March, and it was like click, you know, it was one of the industry which was just switched off. And it caused many problems, which consequences we feel many next months. So, because in our industry, as we all know, it's not that easy that we can come back to the factory. We have to prepare everything again. We have to make preparations. We have to repeat some contracts and talk with the cast and the crew and so on and so on. So the harm, in my opinion, is just more than 3 months. It's probably about 1 year or more. We opened in Poland. It's possible to shoot. Of course, we have to implement all the safety measures. In the European Producers Club, we recommended some safety measures which have to be kept. And, you know, there are many, you know, it's because I was responsible for this work, I've read probably over 100 protocols, and the more detailed these protocols were, I think the more unrealistic were, because it doesn't fit to the audiovisual process of shooting, of making programs. For 4 years, I was press assistant of director who spent 4 years on the set. And I was evaluating what's possible, what is realistic, and how to keep the safety measures on one hand protecting us, but on the other hand, not paralyzing our work, you know, because you can invent everything, but then it's 12 hours job where people are crazy how to manage to shoot the material they are planning. So it has to be very realistic. And then we came in European Producers Club, we came to the conclusion that, and there was a working group consisting of many independent experienced producers from many countries. And we came to the conclusion that only few points, easy to remember, are important and making us protected. One is measuring of temperature. Second is disinfecting. Third is wearing a mask and disinfecting everything what is on the set. And social distancing as much as possible, but we know that in exteriors it's possible, interiors are always difficult and almost impossible. The most protected group must be actors, because they will be always in a danger. So everybody in a crew has to take the responsibility for the actors, first of all, because they will not wear masks. So we have to be responsible for ourselves. Of course, first days of shooting, which we observe in Poland, especially as a Polish Film Academy, which I'm running as well, shows it's not easy, you know, because it's slowing down the process, and the effectiveness of shooting is less, and people are deconcentrated. But I have to say I'm quite optimistic about this, because I think that this is obstacle which will be less and less meaningful, because people will get used to keep these measures. This is crucial, because I think that we all are in danger that if any of the production will become the virus infected, then the whole industry can be closed again. Yeah.
Sorry, very sorry to interrupt you. That's fascinating, but I just wanted to bring some other people in,
yes,
in order to share their experiences and see how their situations relate to what you've just been telling us. So, Philip, I understand you are shooting in the Czech Republic. So, yeah. Could I ask you, what stage of lockdown are you at, and what stage is production at, and what kind of measures are you using in order to make things work and be safe? Thank you.
I think in terms of the official lockdown stages, we are in the almost the last one. Almost everything is open now, and they are now even thinking to release the obligation to wear masks on the public places from next month. Thanks God, Czech Republic, we really started the measures like the lockdown very fast, very soon, and the virus didn't really have so much of possibility to spread. And we have started, I think, the mid of May, we already started the shooting.
Yeah.
At the moment, the shootings. At that moment, we had we had the obligation, the state obliged us to have tests for the actors who would be taking off the masks. Of course, the crew has to wear the masks, the whales even now. After some time, actually, I think I started the production of my series, or like the continuing the production, which was already being shot before, on 20 or 21st of May. And there is no more this obligation to test all the actors, but we still do it. It's more like our awareness possibility and to be on the safe side.
Sorry, Philip, to interrupt you. One thing about distancing.
There was a moment I didn't hear you. Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry about that. What about, one thing I'm very interested in is how are you getting over the distancing issue between actors, for example, for intimate scenes, or is that not an issue in the Czech Republic?
That's why that's why there have been the tests.
Okay.
And since now the situation, it seems from the epidemiologic point of view quite controlled. Even the government is sort of relaxed, so there is no more this problem. And people really want to work and want to do what is necessary, enjoy their work. From this point of view, we don't have this problem with actors. But okay. Of course, I have to say that the Czech Republic, since we were lucky and we didn't have this the closest contact with what happened in Italy or Spain, for example, I think people are a little bit more relaxed and they don't have this fear. So I can understand that even actors in other countries will be much afraid to perform, or will be more conservative or it depends. Probably it's also like a issue of the feeling of.
Sorry to jump in, Philip, but I just want to get everyone in get a taste of all the different scene areas, because we obviously just got limited time. So Nicola Suderland, I was wondering, obviously Sweden, I understand, didn't have a huge lockdown, and also I understand Iceland is already where you're shooting, you're involved with a project in Iceland. So maybe you could tell us a bit about what's going on in the Nordics, please.
Yes, we've been kind of the bad boys in the European community. We've done things very differently from the rest of Europe, with I must say mixed results. The disease has spread in a quite nasty way in Sweden, but nevertheless there are some, in a way, positive things actually that we've been producing all the time. And even we represent a show called Hammervik, which is written by Camilla Läckberg. They started their production in the beginning of April, at the height of the pandemic. That's when they started. So so I was there at the set to watch it, and it's what Darius said. Those precautions they took. It's not rocket science. You wash your hands. You have been disinfections all the time. You take temperature. You wear face masks. All of that. Quarantine for the actors. They weren't allowed to meet anybody. 2 weeks before and during the whole period, etc., etc. And they had a corona coordinator watching.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you sound quite confident, like you feel that's a good system you have going there.
At least so far, there has been no cases with the production that we going on, and there's been maybe 6 or 7 projects actually shooting all the time over the pandemic.
And do you need to do, are you just shooting as normal with knowing that people are well, you're just going ahead and shooting as normal? Because in England, there's quite strict, I'll just quickly give you an outline of some of them. Yeah. So scripts are being reworked so that you have fewer characters in specific scenes. The units are being smaller, so that there's less people to be to be infected should someone be infected. And likewise, broadcasters and production companies have been told to make changes to scenes and scripts to ensure social distancing is observed. And also green screens apparently have been encouraged to use to, whenever possible, to minimize the amount of people on set. And again, outdoor filming is encouraged. And people, like I said earlier, people are required to put on their own makeup. Lunch breaks are staggered, you know, even down to bringing your own eating utensils from home. So on that note, we're going to go to Thomas, because he was going to tell us what's going on in France.
I can just quickly answer what you said there. In Sweden, none of what you said has been implemented. Nothing.
Okay, interesting, thanks.
It's just a quick question to Nicola, because I think one of the key issues that have been mentioned so far, except by Elena, is the insurance companies. And what is key in the debate in France, at least, and we love debate in France, of course, is the question of the role of the insurance company and the fact that you have insurance or you don't have insurance.
Of course.
And what I'm quite fascinated by is all you say, Nicola, seems so self-explanatory and makes sense, etc. But apart from the very heavy lockdown that we have had in France and other countries, we would have not, and we're still not able to do something like to describe, because insurance company won't go for it. So how was the situation in Sweden to that extent?
There was, of course, the productions were insured. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't dare to do it.
So it means that you have local insurer that had the ability to differ from policies that were more global from insurance companies that are traditionally global. Correct. They said in Sweden, that's okay.
Why not? I'm not the producer, so I cannot answer about the details, but they were insured.
It's fascinating. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, sorry to interrupt you there. I want to come to Darius and Philippe, but before we do that, I'd love to get to Nicola from Italy, because they've been hit, well, similar to the UK, and so it'd be really interesting to hear, before we go back to Darius and Philippe, the Italian experience, please.
Italian experience, wow. We started at first and we're finishing very, very last. So this is a problem of our country more in general. So we are very slow in coming back to normal, and this is a bigger problematic than the industry. But the protocol is pretty intense. We are going back on set next Monday on the 22nd, if I remember well. No, so not this morning, the other Monday. So being on set now is like being in a sort of a labyrinth. So you have to follow the strictly rules, so temperature, likewise Nicola said before. So I'm very confident that nothing will occur, apart of wrapping actors in a transparent film if they have to do sex or whatever else. But is a problematic. I mean, there's a sort of scariness between talents in interacting between all of them, and this is something we are facing very vividly. I don't think it's going to be over soon. The big difference between smaller countries and bigger countries are the domino effect on those productions, and the impact on larger crews and larger numbers of projects. Because if you impact on 10 projects or 15 projects or 160 projects or whatever, but the magnitude of the total budget involved, this is problematic. From an insurance point of view, and this is what we are facing, thank God platforms are running their own business. So platforms before COVID we're able to insure better than what is going to happen after COVID. But the larger countries will be more affected into this big mess. And we'll see, probably France the same. I know a lot about France, and they are facing same problems of ours, and we are following each other in a way, from protocol to insurance funding and to state funding. But it's definitely different. The flexibility you might have in Sweden, we could have in Spain, for example. It's way different. And I really hope this is going to be more or less the same very soon. Otherwise, international co-production cannot happen again. Traveling between countries cannot happen again. And so you can set the best tax credit possible everywhere in Europe, but if nobody can travel, if nobody can go and shoot and access those tax breaks, it's absolutely impossible to come back to normal. So we need to come back to normal, first of all, here, and then afterwards, we will come back to normal with protocol and security.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Darius, you wanted to join to make a point.
Yes, I just wanted to refer to the insurance issue because in EPC we have a working group and I'm responsible for this issue. We from the beginning of March, we were indicating that it will be crucial element for the future. The problem is that nowadays, as far as I understand that, there is no insurance COVID-related risk for any industry, not only for film industry. We are working hard with insurers. As you know, this business needs reinsurance. Lloyd is the biggest one, and we talk with them as well. They say, in general, officially or not officially, not till this pandemic, because philosophy is we never insure something which is going on. What does it mean? This pandemic, if second wave will be another pandemic, it's another thing. At the moment, the direction regarding solution for insurance is rather hybrid funds, which is based on mutual insurance of producers of the industry, supported by insurance in some extent, but backed by state guarantee. And we need European Commission for that, that's for sure, because otherwise we'll not insure any co-productions, international co-productions.
Okay, thanks, Darius, that's great. We might come back to this subject simply because we're running out of time and we've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So, and we were going to talk about co-productions for certain in very soon. But before we do that, I'd just like to go over to Nicola Suderland and talk about the situation for distributors and how, but again, maybe, you know, obviously you're working on many different countries, but maybe you could just give us an overview. Okay, sorry, I don't think I think you're muted, but before you, sorry, Nicola, just to interrupt you.
So we take IP from all over the world and we sell to all over the world. So we have quite a big scope where we work of countries and places we work on. But we have not so far, which I am very grateful for, been affected from this situation, this pandemic, as you producers have, because you stop productions, we could still sell. We could still have, you know, a library to sell. We could still do that. And of course, the broadcasters and the platforms all over the world, they need content, and they need it now because you have all the sports rights would have gone, all the planned series that was supposed to be produced. So they need content. So far it's been okay for us. I expect the summer be much more difficult because that the broadcasters would probably do all the reruns and get rid of their, you know, their library they have or their stock they have, and the demand will increase again for the fall. Okay. And in terms of so I think it's very interesting to see those countries who are earliest out of the pandemic and started producing first, like Eastern Europe hasn't been hit so much, like Scandinavia or Sweden hasn't been hit, to Iceland. We have a very big advantage. Yeah. Of course, because we can actually sell shows ready. So we have Honor Season 2, Love Me Season 2, etc., etc. Many new projects that we can supply the market with. So I think we've been faring quite well, actually.
That's really interesting. And Ran, would you have any observations on this subject?
So to continue what Nicola has said, we launched 5 shows during this period of time. Some of them have been ready before the pandemic. Some of them had been edited and post-produced during the pandemic. Actually, today we are launching our biggest show, The Hit, in 30 countries around the world. And I totally agree with what Nicola has said, that this period, which was very weird and very different from anything that we've been used to, but I think maybe the only good thing about it is that we all felt that people are much hungrier for great content. And the power of great content available on the platforms or on the broadcasters was consumed more than any other time in the world. So I think on one hand, if you were lucky enough to have content coming down your pipeline before and during the pandemic, you were in a good situation. But looking forward, and I totally agree about what the other Nikolai said, and talking about international co-production, which is what I think we all like to do. This is why we are here on sharing those squares, because we like to work together. And I think in that sense, I feel if there's something that we need to achieve right now is for more openness from the broadcasters. I think we are not yet, although I wish all of us would love to be in the Czech Republic walking without masks and feeling really secure, but we are not. But I think we are not yet at the situation where we know how far and what is the effect of this crisis. But I think all of us can guess that the budgets that stations and platforms are going to have for productions are not going to be as big as they used to be before. Therefore, I think opening is for sharing, is for much more collaborations. And at the Media Pro Studio is something that we have done before. And right now we just want to, open the door even wider and call out for platforms or broadcasters that are still looking to make great shows that can travel the world, that you can see production value and say, we are ready to partner up. We're ready to carry that big thing on our shoulders too. And I think this is the future of all these squares and all that conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ran. At this point, I think we will move on to a new area. But before we do, I'd just like to say that we'd love to get some questions in from the public. So feel free to contact us with any questions, and then we'll answer them in a moment. But while we're on this subject that Ran's moved us on to, in terms of content, like you guys were both saying, there's such a demand. I think it would be interesting now to talk to how it's going with your local regions. And Thomas, I wonder maybe we could talk to you. What is the situation with France in terms of, has commissioning dried up? Have projects been put on hold? Or, could you just tell us how you're finding the commissioning situation and so on, please?
Yes, Nick, with pleasure. The thing is, as you may know, we have seen the end of the proper lockdown for 4 weeks now. We're still in between situation because schools, most of them are still closed. Many things are closed. Regarding restaurants, we only have the terrace, so we're in the middle. By June 22nd, they should lock it, make it more open and more soft. And so I think by the early, and the cinemas will be open also on June 22nd. Regarding the television station, what is noticeable is that all of the commissioners are staying home until September. Maybe private TV, public TV, pay TV. They all have the same guidelines, which are to stay home, don't do any live meetings with talents, with producers, etc. And so when we see commissioners, it's really late at night in discrete areas. But it's really a rogue, and we don't have to do it, the right to do it. What is clear is that it really depends. Public TV, of course, has received a clear mandate from the state and from the government to keep buying and also accelerate the spending envelopes they had for a certain year and spend it even faster to help the speed up.
So it's a bit of a, can I interrupt you? It sounds like it's a bit of a contradiction. They won't let you meet anyone, but they want you to spend and make all these projects, but you're not really allowed to meet. I guess you do it all online, yeah?
Yeah, but I mean, Zoom works perfectly. And so it's a bit different with the private broadcasters who are dealing with great challenges with the lower of receipts from advertisements. And they see that their model for the years to come might be it's already a challenged model, but so I think they're wondering, they're calculating. But what is clear is that the whole industry has been doing one thing for 3 months, is developing. And we have been all super efficient at developing from home. The writers were available, the directors were available. You could speak to top tier talent because they were home basically.
And and you have the funds to pay them, which is the good thing.
No, I mean, we have regarding the funds to pay them, it's business as usual, I would say, unless you have been hit by the stop of a shooting that you were doing. And then but this is the aspect that has to do with luck. Either you were shooting in the middle of the lockdown and then you are facing loss, which is not our case. We delivered Parlement 8 days before the lockdown, so yeah, we were lucky.
Great. Sorry.
The last thing I wanted to say is that the buyers, they're now drowned in projects that have been sent after those 3 years of development. The whole community, the creative community, has been sending them projects, so they're drowned in content. But it's a good problem, I imagine.
And Niccolo and Gel, is that the same in Italy as you would?
Not exactly. Yes, private broadcasters are in a general trouble everywhere in the world because of lack of advertisement. This is going to be a problem for anyone who's in the private business. State television in Italy, thank God, has not changed its budget. So it's a very good news for all of us because we don't have any effect to the budget, but we don't have any improvement of budget. And that means that the situation will remain probably the same, but with more companies in a big trouble. I would expect something more from state, not from state TV, from state in order to pump up the production, because we need to produce. We need to make those papers into films and series. And this is what is missing now in Italy. We have a total confusion. Everybody wants everything. Everybody wants to commission everything, but we don't have a clear vision of when it is going to be produced. And probably by the end of the process, most of those countries will not exist anymore.
Sure.
And on the theatrical side is even worse.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to get Ran, if you could comment on how is, because we've had some interesting observation what's happening locally, but you work with a lot of big streamers. So could you tell us a bit how, obviously, to be honest, I imagine this period's been incredible for Netflix and so on, because people are just loving consuming very high quality content, as someone earlier said. And so, but could you just give us your observations on that situation, how the streamers are sort of, are they being like the local broadcasters, or do they have a different angle?
It's hard for me to say. I'm not sitting in any building with a sign that says platform. So just like all the guys here, I'm a producer. But I would like the chance to take it and to say that we're involved right now. Just my team. We're doing development in 7 different countries around the world, and every morning we first of all get our morning Corona status from Brazil and Mexico and Argentina and Italy and France and all these places, and this period of time was used for development. And I think many of us what we have done, because there's always a question of how this situation is going to involve to infect the content. Is there something that we're going to change about the content? And I think a lot of us, and that's from a lot of discussions I had with creators, are trying to also use the backbone of our head, which is the producer backbone.
Yeah.
And to think of how can we create shows that take place in limited locations. Can we build a structure that holds most of the production? I think when you're writing a script right now, that would be very intelligent of you to put that in your head. I think to think of a show that takes place in 10 different countries and switches scenes from countries to countries would be unwise if you want it produced. And I think in that sense, you have to start thinking production-wise. You have to, even though it's something I don't like to tell creators, I like to say when we're doing content, everything is free. We're allowed to put helicopters on top of the Eiffel Tower. But I think right now, you need to also start thinking when you're planning about something that can shoot in one place. Really, as a coincidence, we did The Head a year ago, where there was nothing. It was beautiful temperature in the Canary Islands, but we shot 80% of the production in a set, built in one place, with all the actors staying in the same hotel. And I think people should think about that when they're creating content. It doesn't mean that the content is going to feel like it's limited, but we as producers need to calculate and think of that ahead. And regarding your question, no, I think broadcasters and platforms will keep, each of them will demand what they need. We are all forgetting that this summer was supposed to be 5 weeks of the Olympics, and that is completely off the table. And somebody needs to fill those slots with hours of television. And even though there's a crisis, even though the market is down, there has to be great content on the air, and it will keep happening. Okay. So in that case, I don't think anything has changed, except I think the size of the budget, which I think all of us understand will decrease somehow.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to take a question that we've had from the audience. It's from Alberto Maria Galotti, excuse my pronunciation. And the question is, are streamers, SVOD, AVOD and TVOD going to be the next decision takers in distribution substituting theatrical, which means will their contacts be ones to be cash flowed to finance productions rather than distributors? Does anyone want to answer that? Was it not clear?
No, it's very clear. He's talking about the theatrical distribution more than classic television distribution. But the big question mark is, will the theatrical distributors will exist anymore the way we were thinking before COVID? Because this is accelerating so much the way we will consume theatrical content, and probably the way that the platforms they will step into the business will definitely cash flow some of the distribution revenues into different forms, and definitely this is what is going to happen, and even quicker than ever. So we're facing something incredible. During the lockdown in Italy, we had very interesting release on television instead of theaters. And by the way, those movies were more suitable for television than theaters, my opinion. Theater needs different kind of a content, and those contents were more appropriate for television. And this is probably switching also the cash flowing and the financial plans for all of us.
Okay, thank you. And that's great. Thanks, Nicola. And Philippe, one thing that would be, have you seen a change in taste that people are getting interested? I mean, there was a theory that people maybe, particularly wanted lighter content and maybe comedies, and, they didn't want to be scared or depressed. Did you find in the Czech Republic there was a change in taste, or?
Hard to say. I don't know if it's like that immediately what we could have seen. I think it's more or less what Ran already said. The broadcasters need content. We need to try to create great contents, and I cannot say now directly that the broadcasters would ask us for something lighter or something like that. They normally think, at least in Czech Republic, they are thinking in their way of programming and in the view of their viewers. So I didn't experience that at all at the moment, not yet.
I think,
Ran,
if I can, yeah, I think, when we're talking about scripted, even if I have an idea now, the chance that you will be able to see it on the screen before 2 years will pass is very, very magical. I wish it would happen this way. It takes time. I think the only quick responses are very, very quick and non-scripted. These are productions that can quite quickly react, and that also is only happening when we can go back into studios and produce and put people in the studio. Then we can react. I must say that we are content makers, but we're also all viewers. So the question is also to us. And for me, the only thing I wanted to see was everything but news. It didn't matter to me whether it was heavy or light. I was just looking for great content that is not news, and I desperately miss football. But that's my private thing. Sorry. And
Nicola Soderlund, were you going to?
No, but I think there is a clear shift towards lighter demand for lighter things. Of course, we are expecting a recession. I think people are very worried. and to see too many dark things is not what you want when you come back from work and you sit in the sofa. So I think definitely there is a demand for lighter things. And I mean, I know there are many, you know, broadcasts looking for rom-coms, for instance, in Europe, which hasn't been at all demanded for many, many years, things like that. So definitely there is a shift, yes.
And Nicolo De Angelis?
Just to add something that probably will be the opposite of what everybody said, but just my opinion is that probably this will disrupt the trends. So we as a producer, we follow trends and we trace trends into something we want to develop. And try to imagine if 90% of the producers and production companies and broadcasters are getting into rom-com and something lighter, probably in 1 year time, we're going to have a huge amount of this stuff. And probably broadcaster will ask in some time in between this process for darker stuff. And so we are not, probably we are going in the opposite way, and we are not searching for this, because this is something we will have to do and produce in next year and a half. So probably trends will be changing, or probably we will not have any more television to watch because the world will end up in a sort of a dystopian situation where we don't want to get in. But we don't know yet. That's the point.
No, and Eleanor, did you have a point you were going to add?
Yes, I just wanted to add that for us, for instance, in CEPI, before the crisis, we mapped what typology of genre was more popular, and there were a lot of historical fictions and inspectors and kind of in all the countries fictions as well. But now, particularly now, a segment that we can think might manage to react a bit faster, even of the live actions, will be the animation sector. Okay. Because for the animation sector, a lot of, you know, the companies didn't necessarily have to close or stop the production. They had to suspend them. Very often they had to move all their, you know, devices home, which was not necessarily a good thing, because you can imagine very often the internet speed is not the same, it is not good, but they probably be in a position where they can recover a bit faster than the rest, in my humble opinion.
No, I mean, I think that kind of, that innovation side is very interesting. I mean, I think in England, there's been some very clever use of things you weren't used to hearing, but actually works really well, like monologues, you know, like internal, and it's kind of nice because that's what the public are going through, and it's quite creative. And I think, or for example, people talking on their mobile phone in a queue, you know, it's quite a clever way of overcoming these challenges, which is, and it's maybe something we should move on to after a question, but, you know, how will all this shape the future landscape? But before we do that, let's go to a question from Jeff Norton. He says, with different countries in different stages of lockdown, how does the panel think about the future of co-production? And I think that's a really good point to, you know, to jump off from here. So, you know, how does the future look for international co-productions? And, you know, maybe Darius, I understand you did a big one between your region. Would you like to say what you think about the future for co-productions and in foreign partners?
Thank you. I think, you know, I'm trying to be focused more on a future changes, which are obvious regarding the structure of the market more than genre of programming, because obviously, you know, we can talk about shift among commissioning editors, or maybe just to be clear about streamers who have algorithms and they see direction of the audience and they can think based on today that everybody likes comedies and more funny, more lighter. But it would be false conclusion, in my opinion, you know, because we are talking about the content which will be, you know, in months, at least, you know. There was a wave of pandemic programming, you know. Now everybody has enough, I think, especially after having pandemic in news every day.
Yeah.
So I'm rather thinking about change in structure, and what is very important from my perspective as somebody who is also filmmaking, film producer, that obviously there is a shift from traditional distribution, from cinemas and from distributors model to streamers. This is the only space which was profiting during pandemic, obviously, you know, because we all, as an audience, as Ran said, we were also watching streamers. And I think that this is kind of a paradox, and that's what I observe when talking about our projects which we develop right now, that streamers, they obviously, I would take this risk to make this conclusion. Streamers are not interested in international shows because they say, stay local. We want to be popular locally. And I think that this is a big chance for traditional broadcasters to use this co-production and cooperation model, you know, which is uniting us. I'm famous for co-production. I made this co-production, you know, like many of them in films, and recently the same model in TV shows. I slightly disagree that it's over. I would say it depends which model you take. If you want to make this American model that you land in many countries with your crew, with your toilets, with your kitchen and everything, it's over because it's too risky. But the model which we took during the pleasure principle, I don't see any reason why we should stop this thinking, you know, because we were having local crew, local cast, and only director, which was me in that case, you know, was moving from country to country. And I was using totally local staff and local sets. So it's still possible. I don't see this bigger risk for this guy.
Darius, I think there's a very interesting point to what you're saying, which is that I understand on the pleasure principle, you worked with 3 other countries who are all local, but perhaps...
And 3 DOPs, local DOPs.
Yeah. But what I was thinking, it's interesting how that model could work well because you have similar COVID lockdown situation, whereas the challenge will probably be for co-productions taking place in different countries, as I think Ran mentioned earlier, could be more challenging if you wrote a script taking place in lots of different countries. But does anyone have any who would like to comment on, you know, the future of working with, say, countries who are not in your direct neighbor? Does anyone have any, would anyone like to comment on that? Because that's been a very, like, sort of golden egg situation for the last 5 or 10 years. It's, you know, or how about Thomas, did you work on the Phileas Fogg project?
No, I absolutely agree with what said Darius about the streamers not being so interested in co-productions per se because they want local content. So for me, one of the very rare things on which COVID does not have or will not have an immense impact is co-productions. Co-productions always found a way. They were always a niche in the global production. In the proportion, I don't know how it is in Italy or in Spain, but in France, it's perhaps 15 or 20% of the total drama production that comes from international co-pros, perhaps less. So it was always a niche. And the thing, if I go to TF1 or M6 or Canal Plus, and I tell them I will deliver that type of quality, that type of level of production, but instead of asking you 1 million euros per episode, I'm asking you 600,000 because with Ran or with Nicola, I found the rest. They will say, yeah, I love CoPro. So for me, CoPro makes sense as a tool to get good production value and with international shows. And for me, it will stay this way. Of course, I absolutely also agree with Ran that doing a show that is very international by nature in terms of organization, etc., the physical impact, physical being human or physical being physical production of the COVID is huge. And the last thing I wanted to say, just to wrap it up, is that we're not co-producing the Phileas Fogg project, but we're doing a project with the Alliance that is initiated by La Rai, that is called Sopravvissuti, that is a 12-time, 52 minutes series, Italian series, produced by Rodeo Drive in Rome, with ZDF and with France 2, and it's a 15 million euros budget. We were supposed to shoot mid-May. We stopped the prep just in time to not lose too much money.
Yes.
But we will shoot mid-October, and we hope everything goes well.
Okay.
But it's an example of a series where we bring 30 to 35% of the total financing, but it is basically an Italian production. So the challenge is Italian in this case.
A finance situation. If we could go over to Ran, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with Thomas, and I would love to do a project with you. I think a lot of people get confused when we say international co-productions, and they think about a story that takes place in several countries. That is completely not the way to do it. I think it could be done this way, but for us, an international production can be a Brazilian story, a Mexican story, but we feel that the power of the story can travel around the world, and therefore we can get partners from other countries to invest in that. We are definitely not talking about what people used to call 10 years ago, Euro pudding or mixture. I think that is completely wrong. I think in each production that we do, we need a strong local voice and great casting and a very, very unique voice. International doesn't mean it has to be a mix of characters and languages. It can be the most local show in the world and still travel the biggest distance. And we know from the last international successes, most of them are super, super local. Most of them started at a local station. And we're not designed to be an international hit. So, totally agree.
The reason I'm interrupting is because we have to say goodbye to our colleague Philippe. So thanks very much for joining us, Philippe.
Thank you, guys. Sorry I had to go, and good luck with everything.
Thanks so much.
Stay safe.
Bye.
I was just wondering if you'd finished, Ran. I was going to ask Eleanor if she had any thoughts on the future landscape for, even if it's simply finance, do you have any observations on the post-COVID landscape for European countries working together with your body?
Yes, definitely. With CEPI, we are tackling this aspect very much. We are obviously supported at national level in many companies by the media program. This doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. There is a TV programming scheme where independent producers and broadcasters can cooperate together. But again, and I'm sorry if I'm boring to raise again this issue, if there won't be insurances in place, it will be tough also to have this program in place, because in a lot of countries, there will not be insurances for co-productions. And the ones that are insured will only be insured at the national level. So they need something that will match fund that. So that will be the first element that I will not forget during this time for co-productions, which is crucial. And secondly, it will be making sure that we have money in the pot, because as far as I saw in the recent discussions, culture has been treated as the usual Cinderella of the sectors, guys. So it means that a lot of us might suffer and might not be able to preserve their business, especially those that, at the national level have difficulties to be commissioned by the big broadcasters. So it's important to keep that in mind quite a lot. There is a big discussion going on at the European level at the moment, where culture has been asked to become an industrial, become really a sector in the industrial ecosystem. It's the first time that this is happening for the culture and creative sector. So the audiovisual side, meaning the TV sector and the film sector, will have to play a big role in this. And we have to prepare for that, because the discussion will be tough.
Okay, well, I'm very sorry, everyone, but we're going to just go to one last question now before we wrap up, which is from Australia. It's from Krishnan Ara, and his question, or her question, is: in the crisis, is shutting down production in larger countries also an opportunity for smaller countries less touched by the pandemic, such as Greece, Norway, and Portugal? And so therefore they can get a bigger share of the market and offer new ideas and production services. So I guess the premise there is, maybe go to Darius. Would you like to talk on that point? Because you're
Absolutely. I think that from perspective of smaller countries, smaller, I mean less major in audiovisual landscape, this is the basic question. And this is the biggest fear and the biggest hope at the same time, you know, because I have no doubt there will be big international productions. It's a question who will be doing it. And my main question, or question which we ask in European Producers Club, if independent producers would survive, you know, because we are meeting, you know, cash flow issues, financing issues. And third, you know, looking at Spanish flu from 1918, the biggest became even bigger and smallest failed. So we are focused on preserving the circumstances and space to keep our diversity and to keep small and medium companies in distribution, in cinemas, and first of all, in the production of the content. This is very important thing. I'm very grateful to Nicola because I didn't dare to promote our region so much, but in fact, Eastern Europe is less touched by the infection. My personal theory is that after communism, you know, and lack of hygiene, you know, we have societies more resistant to the viruses, probably. But in fact, you know, we are planning shooting in Croatia, and Croatia is virus-free. So there is a chance, but it's a question who will be deciding, and we have to do what we can to avoid monopoly of few big companies who will be not only deciding about where to spend money, but who will produce. This is very important for the future. This is my opinion.
Thanks, Darius. Could we go over to Nicola Sutherland?
Yes, I think, you know, the Americans are still very behind in starting the production again. And so I think there is a unique opportunity for European producers, and especially for non-English language productions, to take this chance and actually take a part and spread products over the world. And I think we should take it. I'm very much in favor of breaking the monopoly of the English language monopoly, so to say, in international production. I think there is, I mean, Netflix has done wonders with the taste of the viewers, because they have actually made people accept other languages in a new way, and also accept very good series from other countries. So I think there is a fantastic opportunity here for us to take.
Okay, and could I just very quickly, before we wrap up our talk, what do people think, if you just briefly say what could be the most positive thing that comes out of this situation? I think you've said yours, Nicola, so maybe Thomas, do you?
I mean, it's a bit selfish, but we had the chance of releasing a show just in the middle of the pandemic. So we had the chance that, as you say, it's a political satire comedy, half hour about the European Parliament. So on the paper, not necessarily something very popular. And we have had a huge traction, a huge attention from the people being at home. So it's terrible, but the demand for content will not go down, and people discover that they like to be home, and so they will consume more and more content, which is not cool for the cinemas, but for the content providers that we're all, I think it's a great opportunity for the years to come. Yeah,
it's great that there are at least, you know, some elements of the economies which can do well, because that's good for everyone, right? Would anyone else like to add any? Ran?
Yeah, I read somewhere like a year ago, 2 years ago, that the scripted series is the art form of the 21st century. If it was the book before and the movie the century afterwards, the scripted series, the art form of the 21st century. And I think these 3 months have got us all to consume the art forms of our century, and people are, if anybody has not binged before, then he probably has during those 3 months experienced that thing of what it is to see a series from beginning to end, to experience what it is to spend 10 hours of content and enjoy that from the beginning to the end. So I think, I hope that what has happened to us is that our appetite has become more delicate and more sophisticated, and therefore the content that we need to provide in the next years will be elevated. and will be better and stronger and much more interesting. And that is our chore for the next year, is just let us get back on a plane and start producing again.
Yeah. Anyone, Darius, did you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to say that I really believe and I really hope that this international cooperation would grow, because in film, and I'm in film production for 30 years, we don't have any more issues about Euro pudding. You know, almost every film which we see is in co-production in natural way. And it's a time for TV drama to use all these benefits of cooperation. And my hope is based on situation when people are locked at home, then you start to be really hungry to see all these places and the richness of our societies. Yeah, yeah. This is my hope.
Good, that's a good point. Nicola De Angelis, did you?
I really hope this this pandemic will bring all the broadcasters to be more courageous. Because they should probably love less ratings, and they should love more experimenting, and experimenting means to also give voice to talents who never had voice. And this is the time to flip around the talents and use new talents, new voices, new vision of the world.
And Eleanor, would you like to add anything?
Yes. For me, I think because the rest has been said, it's probably the innovation aspect. I think before the crisis, we all used to go to festival, and we still want to go to festivals and market to access to the best, you know, stakeholders to make the best of the content. But we reacted pretty well for an industry that is accused all the time to be a little bit of a dinosaur on innovation. I think we can cope, and a lot of new models have been developed, and we have cooperated very easily. So I think that is also an element that we shouldn't forget.
Okay, well, fantastic. And thanks very much for all your time. And I think I probably tried to cover too much in our talk, so we only got to skim on the surface of many things, but it was fascinating to talk to you all. So thank you so much for your time. And I'd also say thanks a lot to Mia and their drama division for putting this event on. And I understand they're fully intending to be open in October for the real event. So hopefully we can all catch up then. Okay, so enjoy whatever your box set you're watching tonight.